Hello, welcome back to our C Sharp basic beginner tutorial. I'm so sorry. I had already done this lesson which was methods with arguments too, and then just at the end of the lesson when I stopped the recorder and then I tested it and I noticed I forgot to switch on the microphone. So it was I just have to do it again. So I'll just go ahead and nuke this code, just take everything out. Okay, so in the previous lesson what we did is we did methods with arguments, whereby um, the method takes an argument and it returns a value. Okay, that was the previous lesson. In this lesson we're going to look at methods that take arguments and then do not return any value. Okay, so they are void methods. They take an argument but they do not return any value. Okay, I just want to show you an example of where you might need such type of a method. Okay, let's go ahead. So what I just did here is I just created a new project, so you can just go to file. In fact, I think I should start everything from the beginning. Yeah, so let's go ahead, go to Visual Studio, go to create new project, console application, console C# application, click next. I'm going to change the let's put it on desktop. Choose desktop. Inside the my apps folder we're going to call it third app, and choose okay, we haven't created the folder yet, so we need to create that folder. Call it third app, and we'll just select that folder and we're going to call it methods with arguments 2. Okay, and then we hit create and it creates the template for our program. Okay, so here we are in this program. What we're going to try and do is we're going to try and create like a simulation of a game, not really a complicated simulation of a game, just we're going to try and emulate something that looks like a game. Okay, um we're going to have a character. Imagine we have a character in a game. Okay, and we would like to tell we would want the character to start at some position. Let's say the character starts at a position 0 on the number line, and we would want that character to be able to move to the left or move to the right. Okay, so the character can't move up or down. Okay, the character can only move to the left or to the right. Okay, so that means the character is like standing just on a number line. Okay, now to do that, first we're going to have a couple of uh, um, we're going to have like two variables that are going to hold the initial position of the character. So we're going to say private static. The reason I'm making it static is just so we can use most of the methods I'm going to create in here. So don't worry too much about the static and the private. Like I said before, we're going to explain what these mean in when we treat classes and objects. Okay, so we're going to say private static is going to be a float. We're going to say initial position. So this is going to hold the character's initial position. The character is going to start at position 0 on the number line. Okay, and then we're going to have another variable that's going to hold the character's private static, the character's current position. Okay, current position. So that's going to be the character's current position. Now at the beginning, the character is going to start from the initial position, obviously. So the character's current position at the start of the program is going to be 0f. Okay, so that means the character is on the origin of the number line. Okay, now we're going to create two methods. That's the whole point of this program that we're writing. Okay, the whole point of this program obviously is to show you, like I said before, is to show you an example of where you might need a method that takes an argument or arguments and returns nothing. Okay, so you usually, when you call this method, you do not expect it to return any value. Now if you remember the previous method we created, that's in the previous program or in the previous lesson, we created a method that calculates the area of a circle. Now for a circle, for such type of method, when you say, and remember it takes an argument, which is the radius of the circle. For such a method, when you call a method, when you call that type of method, you say, hey computer, find me the area of a circle of, say, radius 5 centimeters. Okay, that's when you call the method. When you give it that, you would expect the method to give you back the result of the calculation you have just asked it to perform. Okay, all right. Now that is why you need such a method to return a value. Okay, now there are methods when you start programming, you will realize that there are methods that when you call them, you do not expect or you do not need the method to tell you or to give you back a result. You just want the method to do or to perform the action you want it to do. Okay, so for example, for our imaginary character in our imaginary game, okay, we want this method, the method I'm going to create now, we want the method to move the character to the left hand side of the number line. Okay, so it's going to displace the character from his initial position. Okay, so we're going to declare the method as private static. We're going to say void. Remember, it's void because we're not expecting the method to return anything. And then the name of the method, we're going to call the name of the method move left. Okay, and then open bracket. Inside the bracket, this is where you're going to write your arguments. So we're going to say float. The reason we're making it a float, that's the argument. The reason we're making it a float is because what we're providing here as the argument is the displacement. That's the distance. We're going to assume that distance is in centimeters. Okay, the displacement in centimeters of of the character. Okay, that's from the number line, and we would want that displacement to be to the left hand side. Okay, of the number line. So we're going to call this displacement. That's the argument. So we'll call it the argument displacement. And then remember the way you create methods, you open your curly bracket, close your curly bracket. Inside the curly bracket, you carry out your operations or your statements. Okay, so inside here, what we want the computer to do for us is to say current position equals current position minus, remember, since we're moving to the left, we would want to subtract the displacement. Okay, because we're moving to the left. Okay, so current position minus displacement. Displacement. Okay, all right, and that's it. That's what this method does. Okay, now notice what the method is doing. It just carries out the operation that we want it to do. It doesn't need to tell us or give us back a result. It just carries out the operation on our imaginary character. Okay, now we're going to create the second method, which is move right. Is very similar to the first method. The only difference, remember, if you're moving right of the number line, it means you're going to add the displacement, the provided displacement on the character. Okay, so the same signature with this method. We're also calling it displacement. Okay, now I just want to take this time and say this one more time. I know we've done scope. Remember what I said about scope. Notice what we're doing. We're calling this displacement. We're also calling this displacement. Okay, now the reason we're using displacement twice, remember this is a variable. We declared it here, which is the argument of this method. We're declaring that the same variable again. Remember, in the same scope, you can't have two variables with the same name. But the reason we're doing it is because they are actually not in the same scope. Remember this curly bracket? This is where it starts. So this displacement lives within these two curly brackets. Okay, so by the time this curly bracket terminates, this displacement no longer exists. So we're declaring another displacement here which exists between these two curly brackets. Okay, just wanted to say that out. Okay, so in our calculation, we'll just say current position equals current position plus displacement, since we're moving to the right hand side of the number line. Okay, good. Now we have created our two methods. Okay, if you look at the method, this method, it just takes the displacement. Like if we give it a displacement, when we call the method, it expects us to provide a displacement, but we do not expect the method to tell us anything. That it does not return anything. When we're going to use this method, we're just going to call the method and provide a displacement. Okay, now that's how that's an example of a method that takes an argument and returns void. Okay, let's just go ahead and use the two methods. Okay, so in here in our static void main method, we can say move left. That means we're telling the character to move left 30f. So it's like we're saying move the character to the left by 30 centimeters. Move right, let's say 2.5f. Okay, let's say move left again, 23f. The reason we're using f, by the way, is because it is a floating point number. Remember, it expects a floating point number when we call move left. The same with move right, it expects a floating point number. So by adding an f suffix on a number, you're usually telling the computer that this number is a floating point number. Okay, so finally, let's just move the character again one more time. Move right 2f. Okay, now finally we would want, before the program terminates, we want the program to tell us, or the computer to tell us, the distance of the character from his initial position. Okay, now to do that, we'll just say console.writeLine. Remember what console.writeLine does? It just outputs whatever string you give it. We're going to say the distance of the character from the initial position is, and then we're going to concatenate. What we're going to do here is we'll take the current position, subtract it, so it's current position, subtract it from initial position. Okay, now we would have actually just leave it at this, but remember we're saying distance. That's the distance. If now assume if the character at the end of all these operations, the character is like say 10 centimeters on the left hand side of the number line, that means the character is going to be the current position of the character is going to be on -10. Okay, if you do that, if you do that -10 -0, what you're going to get is a negative result. Okay, so it doesn't really make sense to say the distance of a character from the center is minus 10. Doesn't really make sense. So what we're going to do is, at the end of this, after carrying out the calculations, we're going to use the absolute value function to convert. If this is a negative number, we're going to convert it to a positive number, and if it's a positive number, it remains a positive number. Okay, now to do that, you just use the absolute value function. Okay, now let me just mention this. There are so many functions embedded under the math class. So if you type math, capital M, don't forget, math, and put a period dot, you will see a whole bunch list of functions, mathematical functions that you can use in your program. So for example, ABS is the absolute value function, ACOS is the arc cosine function. This is the arc cosine arc hyperbolic cosine function, the arc sine function. There are so many functions in there. The ceiling function, the clamp. Let's see. There's the logarithm function. If you scroll down, you'll even see round function usually rounds a number. The square root function. There are so many functions you can always check out the math class for. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish up our calculation. So we put this in brackets. Okay, remember this normal bracket closes this one, and this second normal bracket closes this right line, the beginning of this right line. So you use your semicolon there. Okay, and then we're going to run this program and see what happens. Okay, so after all that, no, we're not getting the correct result. Oh, I used the round function, which is wrong. We're supposed to use the absolute value function, ABS. Okay, so I'm going to run that again, and exactly, so the distance of the character from the initial position is 48.5. Like I said, since we're assuming the distance, we're assuming it's the distance we're providing here are all in centimeters. So we're going to come in here and concatenate cm with our final result so that it looks like centimeters. Okay, so the distance of the character from the initial position is 48.5 centimeters. Okay, the whole point, like I said, the whole point of this program we're writing is to show you an example of where you might need a method that takes an argument and does not return any value. Okay, that's these two methods. I think while we're here, it's also a good idea to show you examples of methods that take more than one argument. I don't think we've written any sample of a method that has taken more than one argument. So let's go ahead while we're here. Let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to create a method instead of just move left and move right. Let's create another method that allows us to move the character left and right at the same time. Okay, so we're going to say private static void. So it's still going to be a void method. It doesn't return anything. Move left, then right. So that's the name of the method. That's the name we're calling the method. And then we're going to say it takes the first argument is the displacement to the left. Okay, so we're going to call it displacement to left. Then you use a comma, okay, to separate your arguments. Okay, so this is your first argument. You declare the argument, you write the name of the argument, then you put a comma, and then you declare the second argument. You write the name of the argument. We're going to call it displacement to right. Okay, now assuming we still need more arguments in this method, we can just add them by adding a comma again here, declare the argument. If it's a string, we can write a string, okay, and then the name of the third argument. But since we only need two arguments, we want the displacement to the left and displacement to the right. That's all. We're not going to put the comma, okay? So the comma only stays in between the two arguments, okay? So you put your curly bracket, close your curly bracket, and inside now, notice what we're going to do. We're not going to repeat this code here and repeat this code here. Since we already have a method that does that, like it takes a displacement, which is a float, and just carries out the operation of moving the character to the left, we're just going to use that method here. Okay, so we're going to call move left, and then pass here. We're going to pass displacement to left. Okay, move left, displacement to left, and then don't forget your semicolon, and then move right. In your bracket you put the second argument, okay, we'll call it displacement to right, okay, and then your semicolon. Now it's very I think it's very important you look at what this method is doing. Do you realize that this method is actually calling these two methods one after the other? So when you call this method, what happens is the method calls move left, meaning it calls this method, but by passing it the first argument that you whatever argument you pass in when you call this method as the first argument is going to be the first argument that will be passed to the move left method, okay, and then it takes the second argument that you pass to it when you call the method, and it passes it to this method, okay. Now let's go ahead and use the method up here and say move left then right. Now it means we can take 34f, for example. This is just sample numbers, 76.4f, okay, and then put your semicolon. By the way, you can always validate. Do you carry out your calculators and try and compute and see if the program is actually working correctly, okay. So let's run this program and see what happens. Okay, a lot of people might be wondering why we're getting these kind of values, 0.99985. We do not, obviously it's not supposed to be something like this. But whatever the result, the final result is actually very, very, very close to this 6.0999985, okay. Now the reason we're getting this value, this tiny bit error, is because of this math.absolute value function that we use, okay. The math.absolute value, sorry about that, the math.absolute value function usually on the computer carries out calculations, and it does it on we call it floating point numbers. So you should always expect a result somewhere very, very close to the final result. Sometimes you do get the exact result, but not all the time, okay. So you should keep that in mind. Not just the math.absolute value function, there are most of the mathematical functions usually it's actually due to the way computers calculate floating point numbers, okay. Just keep that in your mind. There's always a tiny margin of an error whenever you use functions, mathematical functions, when you write your program when you write your algorithms or your calculations, okay. All right. I think you can go ahead and play around with this, test and make sure it's working. But the best, the takeaway, the biggest takeaway in this program that we did, or in this lesson, is actually these three methods. These first two show you an example of where you might need a method that takes an argument and does not return any value, and this final method gives you an example of a method of how a method can have more than one argument, okay, and doesn't return any value. It also shows you an example of how you can have nested methods, okay. That's, you have a method here which calls another method in your program, okay. So you have you declared a method, you declared another method, and then in this third method that you declared, you call the the first two methods that you created, okay, within this method. So when this method is called, these two methods are automatically called, okay. Let's just test that one more time and see the result. Why are we not getting results? What's going on? I'm not sure. I don't know. Let's just test that again and make sure that is. I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, okay, so here we go. So it's working fine. Okay. All right. This brings us to the end of this lesson. Sorry, I had to do the lesson twice, but all the better. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lesson where hopefully we'll start looking at objects and classes. Yay!